This webinar will be recorded. Today, our webinar is on lessons learned and technical insights from Sabre's SAP SuccessFactors implementation. We have three amazing speakers that will share their best practices with you today. First, we have Jennifer Corba, who is the Principal HRIS Analyst at Sabre Corporation. Then we have Leanne Goplin-Zabrowski, who is the Recruiting and Recruiting Marketing Expert at ASON. And then last but not least, we have Zakia Muhammad, who is our Onboarding Expert at ASON. Before I turn it over to our speakers, you're welcome to add your questions to the Q&A or the chat area and during the webinar, and we'll address them at the end. Thank you again for joining, and I'll turn it over to Jennifer.
Good morning. This is Jennifer Corba from Sabre Corporation, and I am the HR systems analyst or administrator for SuccessFactors for the recruiting, marketing, and onboarding modules. And then I'll turn it over to Leanne.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leanne Goplin-Zabrowski, the Center of Excellence Manager for Recruiting and Recruiting Marketing here. And I've been with ASON for about 7 years now.
Good morning, everyone. This is Zakia Muhammad. I am the Center of Excellence Manager for Onboarding here at ASON, and I've been with the company for about 6 years now.
Throughout today's presentation, you'll hear us referring to both ASON and Rising HCM. We conducted this implementation for Sabre as ASON, but now you'll see that ASON, Inspro, and 3D Results have joined forces and are now Rising HCM. So we will be rebranding and coming together under the Rising umbrella. We will be focusing exclusively on SuccessFactors moving forward. We will have over 400 certified global consultants, which is the most of any SuccessFactors partner. And we do specialize in end-to-end SuccessFactors services from implementation through post-go live. So we are definitely going to be one of the leaders or the leader in SuccessFactors services. And if you have any questions about Rising HCM, you can certainly reach out to any one of us or to your account manager.
Thank you, Leanne. This is Jennifer Corba from Sabre. And Sabre is a leading technology provider to the global travel industry, so all travel technology. We are there for solutions used by hundreds of airlines and thousands of hotels worldwide. We have nearly 10,000 employees globally, and we are headquartered near Dallas, Texas. Recruiting the best talent and onboarding them is what we're about here, and it's vital to our company's continued success. We'll take a look at the agenda for this morning. We're looking at the implementation project, what we did right, and some key takeaways, lessons learned, and technical insights from those lessons. What's next for Sabre with SAP SuccessFactors and with ASON and AKA Rising HCM. So the implementation project, what Sabre was trying to solve, we wanted to move to one integrated platform. We were all over the place. It was really important for us to integrate finance, employee central, learning, performance, compensation, recruiting, and onboarding. And finance started off the process. They had the initiative to move from the on-prem SAP to the cloud, and we followed along from the HR's SAP HCM solution. SAP SuccessFactors goals, performance management, calibration, compensation, and variable pay, learning management, succession, and career development were already live. So those modules were already done. SAP was starting to really invest their dollars in Employee Central, and we wanted to follow along with that. It was really important to us because we were basically pushing a lot of paper. We were still doing paper We were manually entering hires and changes into the system. We really didn't have any manager self-service or employee self-service to speak of, and little position management, so we needed to make some changes. We partnered with ASON to deploy Employee Central, recruiting management, recruiting marketing, and onboarding. We started in March of 2016, and we went live last year, May of 2017. So what did we do right during this project? What are our key takeaways? First, we had a lot of engaged team members at Sabre. We had separate work streams that were focusing on Employee Central, that were focusing on recruiting, that were focusing on onboarding, and we combined all of those teams to look across all of the modules. We had team members who were testing cross-module, testing across all of the modules, and we had our whole global HR business partners and global team members engaged heavily in the process. So those were some of the things that we did right. We had a dedicated change management and project office, and I cannot say enough good about our change management team. We had a dedicated full-time change management person who attended, I mean, I don't know how she did it. She attended so many meetings every day. She knew how this system was being developed and how it was going to work. She was involved in every aspect of a configuration and testing, and she put together some fantastic change management and communication devices to let everybody around the globe know what was happening and how to use the new tool. We also had some very strong project managers on the ASON and Sabre teams who worked together to keep this project on hand. And again, just change management, it was really key, was dedicated, and she was there from the beginning and until after implementation, and it had all been rolled out to our global teams. So what we did right on the key takeaways as far as sharing of information, we had multiple communication points. SharePoint was used internally at Sabre. We had a team site out there where everybody could go and see the statuses. We had some great lists built out for any issues that were pending so that people could come in and follow up on them. Google Sheets was used to manage issues, and then ASON used the Basecamp site for storing key documents. So that we did really well sharing information, and again, because we were a global team, it needed to be out there and available to everybody. We had detailed testing and cutover plans. We had very structured testing, and we had a very detailed plan, for instance, just on manual migration of all the requisitions, because we did not pull over any of the recruiting information from what was our prior recruiting system, which was Taleo, into SuccessFactors. We started from scratch. We had a real detailed plan to ensure that everything was pulled over, and it's sort of a gradual rollout with anything that was close to offer, for instance, in Taleo, and then we were ready to go live with a real clean system. And we had sign-offs at every step of the project. Again, it was crucial and really helped to make this project successful.
And Jen, I was going to jump in on that. With regard to the sharing of information, I don't think that which systems were used is the important part here. What we wanted to stress is that everybody on the project, both on ASON side and Sabre side, could access these documents, and we were trying to prevent duplication. So we were always accessing the most recent document or the most recent version, and everybody could edit them. So we were sharing documentation and keeping it up to the minute current. And there was never a lag. There was never things being sent back and forth by email and having version control problems or anything like that.
Thank you. Yep. Again, yeah, that was key, keep ensuring everybody around the globe knew what was going on. They had the latest and greatest information. So thank you, Leanne. Any other comments on key takeaways? Okay, so lessons learned and some technical insights. First, who are in and looking at Sabre and helping us with the project or helping your company with the project need to understand the systems that the client is coming from. So, for instance, we could see that Taleo was not going to make a clean migration to, to pick it up and lift it over into SAP. So all of the myriad systems that we were coming from, an understanding of those systems. All the modules, if possible, I'm not sure exactly if it's possible, but if it is, all modules should be set up in all environments, in dev, test, and prod. We had an issue as we were going along, just with one EC starting in an environment that the other modules were not in, so we didn't have that cross module right off the bat. And then I believe it was onboarding. Leanne, help me. I think onboarding was really limited on the environment that was set up in. So again, we were missing out on that full cross-module testing experience.
Typically for a customer, when you sign up with SuccessFactors for these modules, you're given 3 instances for Employee Central, but you're given 2 instances for onboarding and recruiting marketing. So you have to make a good decision there on how you're going to handle that. Either going with those instances that you're given, but understanding that your 1 extra instance of Employee Central might not perfectly match up, so then you can't do your cross-module testing in that environment. Or you might have to make the decision to purchase an additional instance for recruiting, marketing, and onboarding if you really, really want the environments to be perfectly mirrored throughout your testing process.
Thank you. Next point on solution architecture, that should be engaged at the beginning of the project and throughout the project as each module is implemented. The solution architecture needs to provide us a big picture, an end-to-end solution overview, and some key areas of module integration. This needs to be it needs to be done repeatedly throughout the project.
And Jen, we've definitely made a lot of progress in that area as well since you guys were implemented. So we do now have those solution architecture teams involved at the very beginning of the project, really kicking that off to give clients that big picture.
Thank you. We also learned to engage all of our consultants early and throughout the project. And again, you see that word cross-module. So early and cross-module configuration and testing, just ensuring that everything, all of the systems, all the modules are talk to each other and everybody understands how the systems work end to end. We learned that robust workbooks are imperative, and it's also really important to know your workbook. I think that ASON would also agree with that you have your workbook, it's your new best friend. You really it needs to be robust, and you need to know it.
Yep, I second that. As consultants, we live in those workbooks every day. We know them like the back of our hands. And sometimes for customers, they seem overwhelming at first. But getting familiar with it and really getting into the details of that workbook will help you understand your system and help you make sure you're making the right decisions.
And then also speaking of workbooks, you need to review them also for functionality that's already live, because that functionality may already be live and out there in production, but it's going to need to work with the new modules that are coming in, and so there may be some changes that we need to get our consultants' advice on how to ensure that they live together in the new environment and get along well. We also need to define who owns the workbooks at each phase of the implementation. I think we did a fairly good job that. We had some people that were really dedicated for each workbook. And again, it's just imperative to know your workbook and stay on top of it. We found that did we have a comment? Yep. All right, so the workbook that we had on field mapping, which was, again, another cross-module, was just, all the fields that were used in all of the different modules, and it was brought in a little bit late, and it was a little immature. I understand now, though, that this field mapping workbook is brought in quite a bit earlier and is quite a bit more robust.
Yeah, exactly. This project was one of the first projects that we did for what we call the Big Three: recruiting, onboarding, and Employee Central. And it was one of the first times we had done those three modules at the very same time. Onboarding was a relatively new product for SuccessFactors at that time. And so we have definitely polished our approach to it. We do bring in the cross-module workbook much earlier in the project now. And we do have a lot more expertise in how those fields and functionality map from module to module.
And then our final workbook note is just that as you go along, you need to bring in all of the teams and have cross-module reviews of the workbooks and just ensure that your integrations are being planned appropriately and that you are refining these workbooks as you go along through the project. Because just, again, attention to the cross-module mapping is crucial, and we need to make sure that we're staying on top of any changes that are necessary between the modules as we go along and as we learn. So, final lessons learned, actually, the lessons learned on training. We came in a little weak on training, just as far as understanding all of the modules, understanding the capabilities, what the system could do. We would just recommend that if a team is going to be able to make the best decisions throughout the implementation, they need to understand the product and its capabilities first. So any exposure that you can get is essential to end-to-end process review and key areas of focus, just to really understand all of the modules and how they work together, how they talk together, all of those field mappings, and that training should be include hands-on, sandbox if possible, not just PowerPoints, and it needs to be cross-module. You need to understand how everything works and talks together. And then final lesson learned, planning. So first, we need to take releases into account. There could be blackout periods that occur. The release methodology for SAP SuccessFactors, everything happens globally for all of the products. You don't get to determine when releases will happen, when blackout periods will happen. You need to stay on top of that calendar. You need to understand that when releases happen, that functionality will be changing. We found that, as we were going in and configuring in test, there would be a release, and then a lot of that configuration that we had done could be broken, or it could be wiped out if that functionality had changed significantly. So you really need to pay attention to those release notes that are coming out every quarter and understand the impact of those releases object. You need to consider the cross-module implementation plan. Again, cross-module, 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 we'll say. Just completing the implementation without considering the others can cause rework and delays. We had EC configured 3 iterations before starting recruiting onboarding, and we had to go back and reconfigure as we found that some of the fields didn't match up or didn't work from one module to the next. That required us to do some rework and then also have to go back and do an additional iteration. Leanne, any final comments on lessons learned, technical insights?
Just the comment that you had just pop up here that the release process did start in mid-2015. So it's something that has been refined and we've all been getting used to for the last 3 years or so. And it is difficult, especially when you have 3 instances, dev, test, and prod, and the release schedules are different depending on which servers those instances are on. So when you're implementing functionality in dev and test, they might not be on the same release, and the things might work differently in those 2 instances. So it is something you have to really plan for carefully.
What's next for Sabre with SuccessFactors? We do continue to partner with ASON, now known as Rising HCM, on an ongoing basis for consulting services, especially with compensation, variable pay, performance, LMS. I have to say recruiting as well. I don't know how I missed that. And we don't have any major changes, implementations in the works right now. Although we are, of course, greatly anticipating the onboarding upgrade in late 2019. Now I have an opportunity for questions.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, Leanne, and Zakia. This was great. We do have one question that came through during the presentation. So the question was, after your implementation was complete, what job role did your change management person go into? Was this a new role for your company?
It was a contractor that we employed. She'd worked at Sabre before. She was familiar with SAP. She was familiar with our instance. She was familiar with the organization. She'd gone off into another role. She's actually from Australia. She'd returned back to Australia, and we brought her back in for this project. She was here shortly before the start of the project. She was there for the entire project, so the entire year of that study and design and configuration and testing and implementation. She was there for all of that, and then she was there for some period after just to ensure, for instance, that all of our hiring managers had been trained around the globe. She did quite a bit of traveling as well. So, and she's now moved on to a project in another company back in Australia again.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. I think that's the next question we have. It's also for you. What was the size of the Sabre project team supporting this implementation?
We had 2 project people who were full-time dedicated, one project manager and a project coordinator, and they were fabulous. Our project manager was so detail-oriented and just kept us all humming along. They both knew SuccessFactors, and they were fabulous. On the EC side, we had 9 full-time EC team members working on that project, and on the recruiting side, we had 10 to 12 folks working on recruiting marketing. 7 of them or so were recruiters and talent acquisition leaders around the globe. So they were sort of part-time. They would pop in when we needed them, when we needed some decisions made about processes. And then on onboarding, we had 1 full-time person and say about 5 folks, mostly from cross-module, because onboarding is just takes in information from recruiting and then feeds it over to EC. So there was a lot of cross-module going on in there. And then, of course, that full-time change management person who also knew SuccessFactors. So about 25 people or so working on that project.
Great. Thank you for that. I think that covers the question. Then we have another one. One of the key takeaways was around training. How soon can clients get access to their instance to begin getting familiar with the product and its capabilities? I think that could be a question to Leanne or Zakia, but Jennifer, feel free to take it as well.
Yeah, we actually take a different approach now to getting clients access to the system very early on. So before we even start our iteration 1 configuration, we have our best practice instance configured with, minimal features to allow you to get in and start, trying a few things out to be prepared for requirements discussions.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. We have a couple more questions. The next one was, again, things that were mentioned during the presentation was around lessons to learn for the workbooks, not robust enough, lack of clear ownership, for example. What improvements has ASIN made in this area? Again, I think that's for either Zakia or Leanne, I think
the workbooks are extremely robust. I think that one of the issues that we see is that they are overwhelming for customers because they are so robust. So I think it's really more for customers to take the time to get familiar with them and not to become overwhelmed. And then I also think that regarding the ownership, it's just a matter of the customer and ASON or your consultant coming to an agreement on who's making updates. And typically what we would do is ask the customer to update the workbook. Of course, we help guide that process, but that way the customer does take ownership for the workbook, and basically you're telling us what you want, but the workbook is a method for you to tell us what you want so that when we configure your system, we're following those orders, if you will. But in order to do that, you have to be very familiar with it. So it's just a matter of putting in the time and energy it takes to get comfortable with the workbook.
Great, thank you. Okay, I have another question. What was the time commitment of team members throughout the implementation? I think that's for Jennifer.
Yeah, excuse me. Yes, so we did have a number of individuals who were on the project full time. I was at the time before the project, as an example, I was the system admin for the recruiting module, which at that time was Taleo. And so we hired a contractor that came in behind me and managed that system. I was full-time on the Taleo system, and we did that in a number of different areas. So in the EC area, for instance, there were 9 full-time people that were working on it. Their day-to-day roles, of course, people had to assist a little bit with issues and such, but basically 9 full-time EC people were working on it, 2 project managers working on it full-time. I had a couple recruiters that were to me, so say around 3 full-time people working on it on recruiting, and 2 for onboarding, and then our full-time change management manager. And then, of course, we were able to pull in a lot of resources that were not so full-time, but you really have to dedicate yourself to this project and be prepared to pull in some resources to help with the day-to-day running of the operation that, of course, needs to continue whilst this is going on.
Thanks, Jennifer. 2 more questions just come through as well. So first one is, did Sabre purchase 3 instances for all modules?
We did not. That was one of the lessons learned, just in that EC was on its own instance for at least 3 iterations before we moved into recruiting, which was never on that 3rd instance. So we did not have all 3 instances for the project for all the modules.
Okay, thank you. And then think so far we have one last question. How has your HR team changed after the implementation? Were there any new positions or changes in the positions?
As far as, well, I mean, we have, of course, a much different EC team. They're not managing paper anymore, so we're able to have support centers globally. So we have, I think we're down to 3 support centers around the world, and we used to have individuals who would be working on SAP entry locally because, again, they were being handed pieces of paper with wet signatures on them. So, I mean, it was just ridiculous. So there have been a lot of changes that way, in that we're able to manage that a lot more effectively with our resource centers. And as far as other groups, I don't believe that there was much other change other than the fact that we now had manager self-service, employee self-service. As far as positions, if we go to position management, we now have position management, which we didn't really have in any way that you could call robust at all. So as far as that position management, the world, has entirely turned upside down for our managers, who now have, it's really clear to them who they have in their budget, who's an authorized individual that they can hire onto their teams. So as far as that side of position management, that's changed quite a bit for our managers. They are now much more able to effectively manage the size of their team to their budget.
Great. Thank you for that. Again, I believe that's all of the questions that we had from the audience. Leanne, Zakia, any last words? Here's the contact information if you would like to contact any of the speakers. Feel free to do so. Or again, if you have any specific questions about your current project, or you're looking into starting any new projects, feel free to reach out to your account manager. I think that concludes our webinar for today. Any last words from the speakers?
No, just that we're always happy to answer questions. Please feel free to reach out to us.
Yep, and I just want to thank Jen for coming on and doing this with us. We really take lessons learned from clients and make improvements, and it's wonderful that we have, lifelong clients that are going to partner with us in the future. So we really appreciate you taking the time to come on and do this with us.
I really appreciate our partnership with ASON, now known as Rising HCM. So thank you for this opportunity as well.
Thank you all so much. I echo all of the words. Thank you for all participants. Now we're closing the webinar. We look forward to talking to you in the future. Thank you. Have a great day.